when people walk in and they see Intel, all of a sudden, like, okay, how are you doing a billion?
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Tech Talk. And today I have my good friend, Eric Townsend, Program Director at Intel. Eric, how you doing?
Good, Tim. Glad to be here. Excited to be talking to you and with your audience today.
Right on, right on. Well, Eric, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so Eric Townsend, I live in Arizona. And what that means is that in Arizona, we actually have been at Intel for over 2 decades. We have one of our largest manufacturing facility in the world here. Got a fab that's actually about a mile long, which is kind of cool. One of our great expansion we're doing also across the U.S. for manufacturing. I'm here in Arizona, but yeah, work a lot with people in the channel and a lot with their end customers around just different technology challenges they're dealing with and how Intel technology can help with that.
Oh, right on, right on. We're going to dive into a few subjects here today, and I think one of the things I really want to go right into is a little bit about Intel and its relationship in developing the technology that we use every day, the next generation technology. Maybe you could say a little something about that.
Yeah, so we break it down, Tim. At Intel we're very process oriented, right? We're a manufacturing company, that's what we do. But I would tell you that there's kind of three big pillars, if you want to call, that comes into play. One, we've got standards that we really lean in on, technology development, and then also just new manufacturing technology we do. And I think a lot of times people see Intel and they see it just a processor, right? And that processor does drive a lot, but there's a lot of software that leans in there. There's a lot of standards that lean in. When I say standards, think about like way back in the USB, right? There's technically a standard around USB. A lot of people use USB, but it's not just in a computer. It's not just an accessory. Think about Wi-Fi, right? Wi-Fi is something where all of our different devices, we're at Wi-Fi 6E right now, right? That's sixth version. But we got to make sure at Intel that the standards are being built. Even think of PCI Express, think of 5G, think of like Thunderbolt, all these ones. And people go, oh, that's Intel's involved with that? Yeah, our technology we build, it's got to basically fit into that. So we actually, ironically, if you want to know just a tidbit, Tim, you can use this at the next kind of a cocktail program. We are the number one contributor to the Linux kernel.
Wow.
The number one.
Right? Wow, I didn't know that.
We're top 3 contributor to the Chrome OS.
Oh, wow.
We're a top 10 contributor to the OpenStack.
Oh, yeah.
So
I'm familiar with Intel's contributions also. I mean, a lot of the things that we benefit today from, just the manufacturing processes, let alone the technology, has come from Intel as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. When we think of technology development, Tim, we're looking at, everyone knows the PC side, the client computing. We do a lot in the data center side, which we're now putting AI in there. On the networking edge side, so how are we looking at when there's things out the edge, the data we're gathering, right? The security has to happen. How do we ensure technology is that? Graphics, we're leaning there and saying, okay, we've got all this great processing power. How can we make graphics better? We have a part of our company called Mobileye, and that's where we start getting into autonomous driving. And then there's a very large part of business growing around foundry services, where we're actually building silicon for different types of companies. So think of like a company like Amazon. When they have their own environment, they have their specific silicon standards they want to have. Intel's leaning into that. Or other major large companies that say, hey, we don't have the fabs, right, to build this, but we know Intel, you have it, but we want to design it, and then they work for us for manufacturing. So I would say it's from, you look at the endpoint all the way to as far as in the data center, we do all of that from an Intel perspective, but we're working with a lot of companies for it to grow beyond that. So the technology side's huge for us. And I'll even mention too, and people have been hearing about this, but our new manufacturing technology is getting big because we're actually growing our footprint. Now, you Tim may have heard of this footprint growing, but we're actually growing in the U.S. specifically. We know supply chains have gotten pretty constrained over the last couple of years. I say jokingly, because you've told me that. You're like, my customers need, right? But we're growing that now, like in Ohio. If you know that, we actually have purchased land for could fit 9 fabs in Ohio. We have 2 brand new fabs being built in Arizona. We have another one that's being updated in New Mexico. Okay. That's just here in the U.S. We're also growing over in other countries, in Germany and over in Asia. And so the amount of sites that we have today Oregon, Arizona, New Mexico, Costa Rica, Ireland, Israel, Malaysia, Chengdu, and Vietnam. And there's more, but those are big ones. We have all that capability we're building, but we're actually saying, look, how do we make sure that we take that to kind of the next level? And when I say next level, Tim, we're even changing the technology conversation where before it was like Intel, we had like nanometers, how big something was. Now we're saying, no, there's Intel 7, Intel 4, Intel 3. This is where all these different technologies, if you haven't heard one up there, and I know you do have some technical people that are going to be ribbon FET technology. Take a look at that one. That's this new stuff that's being out there. So we're trying to say, how do we take that new manufacturing capability that we're building, that footprint's getting bigger, we're making the supply chain stronger, but then how are we taking Intel prowess of just Moore's law to really make it so that we're pushing technology so that the solutions that CNRT is putting out to their customers are not just like the latest generation, it's the next generation.
It's funny you brought up Moore's law. I think most people have heard the statement about Moore's law and how it exists. Technology technically repeats itself every 9 months on average, and that's actually from Intel. That Intel came up with that particular statement, and it's become less of a theory and more of a fact. When you look at how technology is growing so fast and so consistently, what comes to mind is the relationship you have in your ecosphere, the partners that benefit from that technology, and how they're able to drive their products. And it begs the bigger question of what is that ecosystem to Intel, and how do you look at those partnerships, and what makes sense for you as a developer of that technology?
Yeah, I think Tim, you've hit a big one, right? I think at Intel we have there's a lot of innovations we do. In fact, we have a core value at Intel called fearless innovation. Fearless, right? And we can't do that by ourselves, right? But we are literally when we're working together, like with CNRT, right? We're saying, what's that next level of security that we can put in play? Let's say not today. What's that next generation one? But those innovations that play across, like for example, VR and AR. Those things that we can connect in. So I think that the innovations, but I let people know that ecosystem you said is a huge word because hardware is just a piece of it. Software's not a piece to it. And the services, right, that lay on top of it is huge. So think of like app dev, right? Massive, where you can say, great, there's this hardware piece here. We have a software piece of it, but how do we make sure it integrates together so it works at a certain business, right? That part. And those innovations, it's fearless innovation that actually has to happen so that it can be deployed. And I think that's a part where a lot of your customers they just see the end result and go, okay, yeah, CNRT can just do it. That's because they're part of that chain of that fearless innovation where they can say, hey, look, we see this coming out and there's this Intel hardware. Okay, there's a software partners out there. We've got our own services and kind of how do we make sure we bring it all together? And I think the technology innovation is all those coming together.
I look at that symbiotic relationship, and I'm very appreciative for the role Intel plays, not just as a member of the board of advisors at Intel, but also as a partner who regularly benefits from the collateral expertise that I'm able to fall back on. And Intel is a wealth of expertise for sure. I look at also maybe this as a signpost. What's coming up next? What technology does Intel see developing? And I know that there's certain NDAs you can't get into, but as a consumer, what does the next 18 months look like in your view?
Yeah, so I think so when I'm thinking about what Intel's putting in play, I always go back to there's this services element to it, right? So there's new services that are going to be deployed. I know you guys are looking at runs around security, but we got to think of it as like there's an aspect around like ubiquitous computing, right? So wherever you're engaging on, there's all this type of computing that's actually out there, and there's services associated with that. So, like I said, whether we talked about the VR side of training, and if someone's in a manufacturing environment, they're going to get connected with computing. I think also there's the part of we have so many things happening today from the data that's coming across. How do we make sure that data can be connected with computing? I think also when we talk about just the ubiquitous computing, there's also this pervasive connectivity that I think people have to start thinking about. It's like we're connected in so many places, but when we have like 5G, soon to be 6G, right? We've got Wi-Fi 6E. There's a lot of networks out there that I think that people say, how do we get more out of and becoming more efficient in our business environment? And I think that pervasive connectivity will be huge. And then we at Intel, we're really looking at, okay, those new services that are enabled, those come through the aspect of kind of the cloud to the edge infrastructure, right? So it's when we start looking at infrastructure, there is a data center piece to us, but there's also this part of like at the edge, if it's a sensor, if it's a notebook, what does that edge piece look like?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's this part that I think people have to start thinking about is what's that scalable infrastructure, and infrastructure meaning not just hardware, but the services that can be put in place so it enables us to do more. And we kind of have this part, Tim, it's kind of like the 1 + 1 = 10 effect, where we say, okay, if you think about what customers need today, they don't need the 1 + 1 = 2. That's not what they're paying. They're coming to CNRT, right, and saying, okay, look, you guys know what's coming up, and they're expecting that okay, I need the 5x solution, whatever I'm coming, my ROI I need. So for us, we're saying, no, if we get the right hardware players together, the right software players together, right, the right people do services like a CNRT, right, we're going to have that 1 + 1 = 10 effect, where that return, that business value, the exchange that happens is going to have that 10x effect, because it's not just that people are relying on what they have today. There's stuff that they're going to be doing in the future, like I said, around this ubiquitous computing, this connectivity, and then also this cloud to edge infrastructure. Those are the ones that people say, how does that happen? It's the ecosystem. That's how it happens.
Yeah. And one of the things I garnered from what you're saying, and I just put an underline underneath it, is the technology that's developing is largely, especially focused in the accessibility and the performance increase right now. And I see a lot of that as the cloud becomes even more dense and as resources become more constricted and access is needed so desperately. And transition of data and performa is becoming such a requirement. I'm excited at what I believe is going to be coming out here shortly, and I see some great things coming.
Tim, can I just add on what you're saying there? Let me add on what you're saying, because we call it technology the force of good from an Intel perspective. So we have an acronym called RISE, right? So we want to actually build technology that's responsible, right? From a health and safety perspective, obviously we're building technology, but that technology, there's different pieces we use, but we want to make sure we're responsible with the technology build. We also want to make sure that, and we use the word a lot around inclusive, right? But we want to make it so that the digital readiness for people, everyone can actually utilize that technology wherever they're at, however they're using it, that it's inclusive. Also that it's sustainable. Right? I think a lot of people when they're, and you guys are known for this at CNRT, but we want to make sure that the stuff that we're building, that we're actually not impacting the climate as much as maybe other solutions out there. In fact, in Chandler's, and I was telling you about this, Tim, where I'm at, we actually have a water treatment facility, and our goal is to recycle 100% of the water we use. 100%. We are not far off from that goal. It's the 99 points percentage right now. So we literally, everything we're using, we're trying to recycle. And I think also we're saying, okay, we're going to be responsible, we're going to be inclusive, we're going to be sustainable, but also if we can enable things in our technology that I don't know how to say, it enables passion within our employees, but also makes it so that there's expertise that's driven out there around AI, machine learning, things that can grow people's use of technology. We're gonna enable that.
Yeah, that's quite a feat. I noticed the purpose statement of Intel, and I'd like to just say it out loud. Do you mind if I read it to you?
Yeah.
We create the world-changing technology that improves the life of every person on the planet. That's a big bite out of a big apple. What do you have to say for yourself?
Oh man, well, so I tell you, it's Tim, it gets you excited, right? Each day you walk in, you're being an Intel employee. That's the mantra we have, right? So how do we take this world-changing technology, which I mentioned, the things around standards, technology, all this stuff, right? So we've got this oyster, right? But then how do we grab the pearls to really make it so that we can improve the life, not necessarily have certain money we're making or things like that, but improve the life of every person on the planet. So things that we look at, I could show you videos of people that are in Africa and how we're helping. I could, in different countries in Europe. I could take you to places that are out in the middle of nowhere, and we're saying, how do we make sure that we can make it better for the environment? There's things we put in play that improving the lives of every person on the planet. That's not a goal. That's what we're doing every day, and we do that by we work with the best people, right? We work with CNRT, right? Some of the best partners out there. We have the best customers, and meaning that the customers we work with, they are ones that really make us live that mantra. What's the world-changing technology?
What
You know what I
the
mean?
audience doesn't know, and you might be a little embarrassed for me to put this
Yeah,
on this, but
yeah.
Eric, you yourself take out time every other year, every year, I believe, to
Hmm.
go build huts in Africa and take care of people
Hmm.
and extend yourself.
Hmm.
And Intel promotes that behavior.
Oh yeah, yeah. In fact, there's a Job Corps group at Intel that goes to different parts of the world and they'll actually implement computers for people, computer labs. I mean, because we want to make sure too that kids are learning, right? And you'd be amazed how many places you go to, Tim, that don't even have computers. And we're used to it where we're at, right? Okay, it's like when are we upgrading? But there's places you go to, and for them to literally see a computer come on the screen, their eyes just go like, how did that happen? Like remember electricity is not big in all parts of the world. So when they see you press something, and a screen pops up, well on the keyboard, forget about it, but they're trying to equivocate how did he make this thing light up here and how it's all come together. And it's the
Eric,
partners,
what do
customers,
you what
suppliers,
do
all of
you
it.
what do you say to the American business that says, well, that's great and all, bleeding hearts and all, but that doesn't make financial sense? Why would a business want to send their employees out to the netherly regions of the world, especially
Yeah,
poverty stricken, where there's no economic value? We're not going to sell a ton of
yeah,
computers out there.
yeah,
What are you doing? Why
yeah,
would you, why would a company like yours really see the value in that? I mean,
yeah.
you get what do you get out of that?
Well, that's part of the purpose, right? And so every word in that purpose statement is clear. Improves the life of every person on the planet. So not we're not saying it's going to be this person or that person. It's every person. So wherever they're at, like the inclusivity we talk about as far as our technology, that's for everyone. When we're building technology, Tim, we're saying how can that be utilized for everyone, right? So we have ethnographers that literally will go out and they'll sit with people and see how they actually do work or how they actually use technology. And sometimes people have disabilities. Sometimes we've had people that are blind, people that are deaf, and it's like, how do we get technology working? And it kind of goes back to Tim, that part on standards. We'll sometimes be sitting on standards and say, "Hey, so how do we get this person to use this?" And they're like, "Well, that's not. We don't. They're not really a big target market." It's like, no, 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 we don't care. It's for everyone. It's every person on the planet should be able to use this. And they're like, "Well, they're not really that." So we sit back and say, "How do we make it so that anyone can use it? Like, what do we do there? Right? There's AI, there's machine learning, there's things that we can put into this." And people on some standard board don't have that big a breadth. So we're like, okay, look, we got some people we can bring in, some supplier, other people we have. Let's bring in, but let's make sure that like when we're building this one thing, it's not for just one set of people. We want it for all because that'll make it world changing. If we're just making it for one part, that's one country changing. That's not world changing. We
No,
want
it's not.
world
You're right.
changing. And
Yeah.
invariably, people then they start seeing it. And people start catching. They're like, "Oh my gosh, if we could implement a security solution that makes this sort of multi-layered security and it can be used across the world, and it works with NIST and it works all these frameworks that are already out there." It's like, yes, keep people secure. We want that, yes, right? But it doesn't matter where they're at. If they're a small business that's in a far-off country, they should still have the same security that someone in the New York City has.
And people could argue, what they want to argue about, but you are the world's largest processor and semiconductor manufacturing organization on the planet. So
Yeah, so
you
there's
you
depending on
kind
what
of
day of the week you're looking at, right, and the numbers and what it is, we are one of the largest, I would tell you, right? But I would tell you that when you think about what we bring to the table, right, I would say that there's a lot of great companies that make silicon. Intel, what we're going to focus on is really how do we make sure that we are bringing that next generation manufacturing technology table? How are you making sure that we're making, tech for good, like the responsibility, right? And then also I think that like, how are we making sure, and this goes back to like, one of our original founders, a guy named Gordon Moore, to me, Brock, he
Mhm.
said, look, he's like, each day when we're looking at how we're building processors and how we're getting in, is like don't be encumbered. Don't be encumbered. Go off and do something wonderful. Like don't get latched in. We're like, okay, can we do this? How do we do this? It's like we don't howl it to death. It's like just go off and do something wonderful for what we have. And that guy Gordon Moore, that's Moore's law.
That's Moore's law.
Came from that guy,
That's
right?
correct. Yes.
And he didn't say, okay, go off and do something 2x faster or 3x faster, right? He's like, go off and do something wonderful. And we got the right technology to bring it bear. And it like I said, if Gordon knew many years back that we were creating Thunderbolt, you're like, you're gonna have one wire do everything. It's gonna do everything. Everything. It'll connect everything. You don't even have to have one wire. Yep, one wire. Yeah. You're gonna and then there's gonna be Wi-Fi where there's gonna be like you won't have any wires, and it'll basically be you could have like everything in your house connected to a network where it's talking to the. Oh yeah. I think he would say that's something wonderful. That's something wonderful that everyone can use and world changing.
I like to think Gordon would say, well, yeah.
No, it's Tim, I'll tell you the best thing of people at Intel, like we have, I would say the best CEO out there. I'm biased, but we always know there's areas where we can grow and improve upon, and we only do that by working with great partners, great suppliers, great customers, because that's what we can hear from them, what they need, right? We can build things, but we really want to say, what is that need that people have out there? And we say that tech is a force for good is a key thing, and it can be used anywhere. But we're constantly trying to work with people, say, where do we need to go? What's that next generation thing we need to stare at?
Thank you. One of the things that surprised me was to find out a little bit about your footprint and discipline within the organization. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit more, but I was shocked to hear about the presence of software and its role within Intel. When traditionally people think about Intel, they think of silicon wafers and people wearing spacesuits pressing microprocessors into 7 nanometer, 10 nanometer footprints. But actually, there's a tremendous effort and presence in software development.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I think when Tim, we call that kind of our scale. I'll be honest with you, people that they know Intel and they're close to us. We have a scale that we bring to the table on anything, and meaning that like when we definitely have a scale, we have all those fabs I told you about, right? So we scale in manufacturing. But when we're trying, and when I mentioned about that ecosystem, right? We try and scale our ecosystem, meaning we are working hand in glove, and everyone knows, hey, Intel works very close with Microsoft, right? We work really close with the Linux community. I told you we're number one provider, right? You think about bigger companies out there. If you looked at like Salesforce or Oracle, right? Epic, right? From a healthcare perspective, we want to make sure that scale we put out there, that kind of comes together across hardware and software. And software at Intel, we have 1 in every 5 Intel employees is involved with software. That's what they do. They're fully focused on software. In fact, a lot of times when you're seeing things come out, and it's just, I think we're just used to it, Tim, right? Like if I can go and if I take you a very simple example, I can go grab an old mouse that had a wire on it, and I can just plug it into the Windows 11 system and it just works.
Yeah.
Backwards compatible. We have to test things back multiple generations. Same thing going forward. When we bring out a new version of our processors, we got to make sure it's going to work with that latest and greatest wireless thing that's AI and voice activated, right? So there's this whole part around when we're looking at things, we got to scale. And I'll go back to what you said before. When we think about Intel, what gets me so excited about kind of just what we do, do you know that we have an aspect when we say scale, it's our business and what we do, right? There's manufacturing, which just, 10 billion transistors are produced every second at Intel. So if you want to throw one out there, that's 14.3 billion in capital investments in 2020. Just, that was a hard year for people. That was
number.
Yeah.
Did you just say 10 billion per
Billion.
second?
Per second, yeah. Billion.
10 billion.
Billion, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty. I think I said our manufacturing scale, it's pretty epic. When you sit there and you see it and you're like, oh my gosh, that just went that's billion every second, right? But here's where it gets really cool, right? When you sit back and you say, man, so what actually happens? So there's the business, the manufacturing, our supply chain, right? That supply chain that we're trying to grow, right? We are actually growing. We're actually investing in companies. In fact, we did in 2020, it was 1.2 billion that we put in diversity companies. So how do we grow our supply chain so it's not just like some big companies, other people that we can bring in? I could tell you that even in our community, we set ourselves to scale. Since 1995, we've had about 18 million hours of volunteer service. That point said earlier about, hey, Intel, yeah, they're like, hey, go off, and that doing something wonderful isn't just in a bunny suit or not just in a fab. Go off and do something wonderful in your community. Every year, I would say multiple times a year, but there's big times a year where our sales and marketing will go out in the local community, and we just go out there and say, hey, I'm the local Arizona, and we've got sales teams in Ohio, we've got people in all places, and how do we go and lean in there? And it's interesting to see that scale because most people, they just see our fabs. And if you ever in Intel fab and you sit outside, you're like, this is like a city. Like, whoa. It's just huge, right? But then you take a step back and you see the people that are inside of it and what happens there. And like I said, our innovation, people think it's this goodness that happens or this secretness happens to a fab. I'm like, no, that's one part. There's the parts when we're talking to a partner like today, we're sitting here, right? There's innovation that comes up in our conversation. You know what? Could we do this? That'd be great if we could do that. And all of a sudden we take that idea and it's like, Gordon or Sarah would say, yeah, someone had an idea back in like the 90s of like, we could put everything on one cord. If we get everything on one cord, that would be awesome. And like, well, we got a keyboard, got a mouse, you got speakers. If you got a camera back in the day, right, that was pretty crazy. But all these cords, you want to put on one. They're like, yeah, that'd be great. Just do one. Just figure it out. How do you want to do one?
I know you can't talk about some aspects, but I can. So I will say, Intel, I just capitalizing on your last point. Yes, there is a symbiotic behavior between your partnerships and your ecosystem and your development. What I've grown to know myself is that you're a tremendous driver in innovation. Platforms that most people would never recognize, and they're long past their development, like the IMS or the Intel modular server.
Yeah.
Other things that have gone in with common backplanes and multiple redundancies and functionalities that have been adopted either through the innovation of Intel directly or in partnership through carriers like HP, Dell, and others who have all proffered from that innovation. Intel consistently develops, has that notion, that idea, that thought. What if?
Yep.
I wonder if we could do that. I wonder if we could try this. What do you say we give it a shot here? And you're developing that energy. You're developing those refined components that are being adopted through common channels, and agreeably, they are even being bettered in some cases by those relationships. In some cases, they're simply being stamped, in my opinion. But I think we owe a great debt, honestly speaking, to the pioneers in Intel, the people who say, can we do it on one wire? I wonder if we can do this.
Right.
And then actually do it.
And Tim, here's the cool thing, right? Like I just, whenever we talked earlier about kind of when we get passionate Intel coming every day, right? You know that Gartner ranked us in top 25 supply chains across all industries.
Yeah, I didn't know that, but it wouldn't surprise me. I think we get a lot of bad press. I mean, we're obviously coming out of a pandemic,
right?
At least we're coming out of it.
Yeah.
And we've suffered tremendously, and the supply chain has suffered as well during this period of time. There's been a lot of awakenings as far as supply chain is concerned. I personally feel, as a partner of Intel, that Intel was aware of this and got on the bandwagon quickly and has shifted efforts and behavior to try to meet, domestic supply chain needs. And I'm really enjoying what I'm starting to see as a ramp up in accessibility. And I expect it's going to take a little while to get to the point where everyone's going to be happy there. But, I do tip my hat a bit there to your effort, and I do acknowledge that effort.
And once again, Tim, right? Like, think about this. You provide feedback. Some other OEM hardware provide feedback and say, look, we need to make sure we can get this stuff locally, right? And this is not just, obviously we're doing a lot here in the US, but saying over Europe, they're like, hey, by the way, we don't want things going over all the different seas and taking time on a boat and all this stuff. We need to get so it's literally on our continent. And so if you think about just this, once I go back to that scale piece that's coming into play, right? I mean, you ever get a chance, anyone that's watching it, I'll tell you, go look out just Arizona Intel fabs, and you'll see the fab. And like, we have a fabrication facility that's 1 mile long. 1 mile. I mean, that's like, and literally, I have friends that work in the fab. And it's funny because like Fab 32, Fab 42, there's Fab 52 and Fab 62 is coming. And in 32 and 42, like they're like cities. Like, okay, someone works in 42, even though it's on the same block, right?
Mhm.
But they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to 32 tomorrow. It takes so long to get there. But there's
They
like,
literally have their own zip code.
well,
They
I don't know if
literally
it's zip code, but it literally it seems like it's when people walk in and they see Intel, all of a sudden like, okay, how are you doing a billion? And there's so much automation that we have, Tim. Like that's why like I looked at our suppliers that we have at Intel and that partnership that we have because the innovation that people expect from Intel, we expect that from our suppliers. So there's some stuff that we work together with them and they say, hey, like we'll say our process to make it better, we'd love it to do this. And then we say, great, well, we actually, once we put that on, we ask them, how can you do that? So this part of innovation, everyone that gets the benefit from it, this open ecosystem we have and how all these players can come together, it's Intel putting some things in place, but all the other people like CRT, right? They come back and say, I like how you've done security, but we need one layer more.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, that's hard, Tim. Well, no, but I have a customer that's in finance or in banking, and they ask me for one level more. Okay, great. Well, then we got to figure that out, and then we say, okay, well, let's see. It's hardware, it's software, it's services. Is there another layer we can put on? We could put stuff down on the board, but is there a piece of software that we can put in there? And it's exciting because Tim, it's like this when you're bringing all those people together and not saying, okay, we're gonna do it all by ourselves, but you're bringing them all together. That's where that Moore's law kind of comes into play, where you're not relying on one person to get there. It's actually multiple people coming together to kind of give us the best.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's definitely symbiotic.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely participating with a common energy and a common goal. I think we all benefit from that. Eric, I really appreciate you and your time. I appreciate the opportunity I have to work with you also, mutually. Thanks again for joining us. And to everybody else, thank you for joining in for Tech Talk.